This is A Geek Leader. Hey guys, John Ryder back again with episode 66 of A Geek Leader podcast, and I want to go ahead and have you guys pause the show, go to iTunes, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, wherever you are getting this, and subscribe, leave a rating, review. That would be awesome. That would help me out big time. But, so now that you've done that and you've left me a rating, review, you subscribed and all that good stuff, I want to tell you about our guest today. Today we have Kevin Griffin on the show from SwiftKick, and I was on his YouTube channel not too long ago doing a presentation on leadership, and I'll link that up in the show notes. But Kevin runs SwiftKick, and SwiftKick is a company that does training and consulting on the software side. He's got a lot of good information about teaching everything that you know. He talks a lot about how you can learn more through teaching, and how writing articles about things that you've learned that you publish publicly can help you out in the long run and come back to really benefit you. So I really want you guys to give it up for Kevin Griffin. All right, today on the show, I've got Kevin Griffin. And Kevin, if you could tell the folks a little bit about how you got started in technology and what you do now, and then we'll just take it from there.
Sure, absolutely. First, John, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate chatting about this sort of thing. But my origin story, wow, I've told this story a couple times, and it all starts back when I was 9 or 10 years old, and we brought our first computer home. This was probably early 90s. Can't exactly remember the year, but I remember my dad brought home a Packard Bell 4086. It was our first computer. It was a big deal. It's when the computers you could buy at the store eventually got CD-ROMs in them. So that was like the new thing in computers was, hey, there's a CD-ROM built into it. So not as early as probably a lot of people you've talked to or in your own experience, but that Packard Bell, that was my first machine, and the rule in the house was I was not allowed to touch it unless Dad said it was okay, because you have to imagine it was a very expensive toy, and no one. People knew how to fix these sort of things, but my dad was just learning as he went. We had a neighbor down the street who was learning this stuff too, so we were playing and we were trying to figure things out, and we really didn't know what it was useful for, other than writing some documents. Like I could do my homework on it and print homework out. But I grew up in a military family. My dad was in the Navy. And what happens when you're in a military family is that deployments occur. And my dad went out to sea for a period of time. And when Dad's away, Kevin will play. So I would retire myself back to our computer room that we called it. It was just our spare bedroom. And my dad left a couple copies of just computer books we had picked up. And one of them was DOS for Dummies. And I was slowly teaching myself DOS as a 10-year-old, and I got to this chapter in the book on QBasic, and it's not a very involved chapter. It just says, hey, if you want to teach the computer how to do stuff, how to write your own programs, you go to the command line and type QB or whatever the command was. And I'm like, all right, well, let me try that. That sounds fun. And QBasic. Yeah, we are so spoiled today with modern editors, because they give you all these tutorials and guidance of how to get started writing a program. And there was none of that back in the early 90s. I got to an empty blue screen that had nothing in it. And I ended up going into the help documentation where someone at Microsoft back in the mid 80s wrote help documentation for Hello World. So I wrote Hello World in QBasic and said, oh, this is really cool. And just went to the next thing and the next thing in the help docs of QBasic. And remember, this is DOS. So it's 80 characters across, so many down, not a lot of room. And I'm reading help documentation and accidentally taught myself like conditional logic and how loops and stuff work. And it just kind of clicked for me as a 10-year-old. The next step was going to the public library because there was no internet yet. We weren't there, and I checked out books on writing programs with QBasic. My school system wasn't set up to foster the kind of knowledge I was looking for. I remember going to our public, not our library, but we went to the school library. And I asked them, "Hey, I'm really interested in doing this sort of thing. I'd like to learn more. What can I do?" And the librarian put me in front of HyperCard on this Apple IIe, whatever we had. And
HyperCard. I'm not familiar with HyperCard.
So HyperCard was a program where you could design. It was basically like a Visual Basic designer, where you design a form and you could have events or you could link it to other cards. And it was like click and point or point and click programming. It wasn't anything spectacular. I've used a couple of small programs written in HyperCard, but it wasn't what I was looking for. So I said, okay, well, that's fine. Just moved on, started teaching myself more. I moved on to basically C++. That's what I started teaching myself. And I moved into middle school. In middle school, I took a computer class. I was really excited. And the computer class was teaching us Logo. And Logo was how you taught kids how to program before Scratch ever became a thing. And the idea with Logo was you have a turtle on the screen, and the turtle has a pin on its belly, and you tell the turtle to put the pin down or pick the pin up, and he can move forward, he can turn any degree, and you can draw these fancy pictures. And Logo is the program language that teaches the turtle what to do. So I walked in that class and went, I am beyond this. I could do this in my sleep. This is easy. So I went a couple more years and really didn't have anything to foster the education that I was looking for. Got into high school and could take some real programming classes. I remember taking computer programming. We took an advanced placement computer programming class, and those were teaching C++, which I thought was fantastic. I knew enough C++ to be dangerous, but I was already writing like my own Windows programs, and I was at a much higher level than the folks that were coming into this class fresh. The one thing I will probably never forget is we were tasked by one of our teachers. It's probably our AP Computer Science class. They told us, write Battleship, write the game Battleship, and we're working in teams. And you had a lot of the teams that just went and wrote some of the basic Battleship code. It's like, all right, player 1 does this, player 2 does that. And you just share the same keyboard. I decided to go home one night and just write the networking code so we could use our school network to play on 2 different machines and basically peer-to-peer. And walked in the class and to show the teacher, and the teacher's like, oh, okay, that's interesting. It's like, okay, well, I was expecting more, but all right, well, cool. We still got our A. She went over to the next group, and someone on the other group learned how to play a WAV file with the Windows API. And it was just, it's one line of code, play WAV or whatever it was. And it would say, you sink my battleship. Is what the WAV file. And she was like, that's amazing, blah, blah, blah. And at that moment, I realized that clients will never understand or appreciate the amount of work that goes into something unless it's flashy. And because one line of code versus the hundreds of lines of networking code I wrote to support this game just went unappreciated. So I was lucky. I kind of knew what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to write software. I went to college for computer science. I did the classic route that a lot of developers my age went through, where we got comp sci degrees. I did a minor in information systems, which I think was more useful than my comp sci degree, and got my first job working for Symantec, of all places. I thought I had struck out. I was happy because I was with a big company. I was going to work on something that people relatively all around the world use. And it was great. And I was there for about 3 months, and I came in one day. And they said, "All right, we have an all hands meeting downstairs." And so, oh, okay. Well, apparently that was common. Every quarter, they would bring everyone down and just say, "Hey, this is how we're doing." Well, we all show up downstairs, and they said, "Hey, we're closing the building. You're all fired. Some of you are going to get the option to move to our office in Santa Barbara, California, which we're in Newport News, Virginia, is where our office was." And so that's like, all right, move to the other side of the country. And I'm sitting there. I just know there's no way they're going to offer me anything like that, because I've only been here for 3 months. I'm the most junior person, probably not just on the team, but in the entire building. There's no way I'm going to get anything. So my first big job out of college, I got fired or laid off. And, it's one of those things that makes you humble. And it makes you realize that there's no such thing as job security. You have to build your own job security. And that put me on a track to just to learn as much as I could, and also make myself a more public figure, or try to make myself a more public figure. So my next job after that was for a consulting company where we worked on government contracts. We had a couple commercial contracts, but I really pushed this initiative of learn as much as I can, teach everything I know, and just try to be the best and most public person that I can. And that led to me getting an opportunity to eventually quit my job and go start my own business, which I did this is 2018. I did about 2011. I quit my job. I went and started my own consulting company, and I've been doing that ever since, where we work with a variety of clients, managing small and mid-sized business systems. And we also do a lot of training as well, because I'm still very firm on that idea of I need to teach everything I know. And if I don't know it, I need to go learn it, and then I need to go teach it. And that cycle is what's kept us in business for so long.
So how do you think that that teaching everything you know helps you learn it better? Or do you think it helps solidify what you know, as well as gives you that kind of PR or that public facing? What are the big advantages of doing that?
Yeah, the big advantage is it helps you realize the questions you're not asking. Because everyone learns a little bit differently. When I take in information, and let's say I'm learning something fairly cutting edge isn't the word, but something more recent. Vue.js is a great example. We've been diving in pretty deep on Vue.js because we have a client need. We have some training needs that are coming up where we're going to need to know Vue.js. So I dive in, I start absorbing the material, and I ask myself a couple relevant questions, and I go find the answers to those questions, so I'm able to answer other people whenever they ask. But what I've found time after time after time is that no matter how much time and effort I put into learning anything, I'm going to sit down and present that information. Someone's going to ask me a question I had never conceived. And it has been that way I can go all the way back to some of my early talks on jQuery, long time ago, where I thought I was answering and presenting all the critical information around jQuery. And I would get a person out there who would say, well, how do you do X, Y, or Z? And my response is, I never thought about that, but that's a fantastic question. I have to go and figure out what the answer is, because I don't know that off the top of my head. It's education, just teaching everything you know helps you get questions that you had never even thought of, but that just adds to the more things that you can teach. So I don't know how many questions I've been asked that just influences the material directly, because we'll go back, change talks, we'll change course layouts, so we can answer these questions. Because if someone's asking a question, most likely 2 or 3 or 10 other people in the class have the exact same question. They're just too afraid to ask it. And so it's helped me just grow more as a professional, because it's things I've never considered before. And it just helps makes the material better.
Yeah, no, I think I agree 100%. And that's kind of one of the things that I've tried to do is always teach the things that I'm learning, because it helps solidify it in my mind. Plus, it's it just expands your knowledge and expands those around you. It's pretty helpful.
Yep.
How have you seen the benefit of that? Like as far as your consulting company, I'm assuming that helps draw people in or helps qualify yourself as being an expert or a leader in those fields.
It helps a little bit. Our training and our consulting work are kind of two sides of the house. But what sometimes happens is on the training side, we'll go do a training and then we follow up with some mentoring or some higher value consulting. And usually that's very short engagement. We've taught you how to do stuff, but now let's work with you to actually put those ideas into practice. That happens often, not often enough, but it does happen. Most of our work for consulting comes in directly as consulting. Those are customers who don't really care how it works; they just need it to work, and we're happy to provide that service as well.
When it comes to training, what do you think works best for people? Is it kind of the face-to-face? Is it online classes? Is it what do you think typically works best when it comes to IT and software development and technology folks?
Some folks are more self-paced. They like doing things like the Pro sites or Udemy's and whatnot, where they can go at their own pace, and that's fine if you're dabbling. You don't really have a need. You don't need to get up to speed on something quickly. You have a little bit of time because you can sit down and you can go through videos at your own pace. The companies that we work with, they have teams that need to hit the ground running on different types of technology stacks in a relatively short period of time. And what we have found with those groups is that by having a live instructor, so I'll do it in virtually or I'll go on site. When we dedicate that time, whether that time's a day or a couple days to whatever topics that they need to cover, the students are more engaged because it's really the only thing you're thinking about. And we design our trainings around different learning styles. Some people can pick things up by just listening to a person talk, or just watching me do a demonstration. We also have a variety of hands-on labs, so the students do the work themselves, but they're in very controlled scenarios. So you need to do X and Y, and that's one lab. Well, the number of people who go into some of these hands-on labs, they learn more out of that because they're actually doing. They're not just listening to someone talk. And then we also have written manuals that people can read. And so if they learn better visually, reading a book or reading a manual, we try to cover all the bases. And every now and then you get the one student who just has a little bit trouble getting over a major hurdle. But that's what the instructor's for. The instructor can then work one-on-one with these different students and help guide them over some of these hurdles. So in our experience, if we sit down and do a 3 or 4 day training, every student comes out knowing exactly what we need them to know to go on to these projects.
Yeah. I get that. And I think, everybody's different, but I'm that hands-on learner. If I have to sit down in a lab and kind of do it in order for it to really stick, I can listen to it and I can kind of understand the concepts, and I might be able to even regurgitate that content, that context back to you. But if you put me in front of a computer and said, hey, code this, if I haven't done it before or tried it or played around with it, I'm lost.
And a lot of folks, it's not a hard part of understanding syntax or what to go Google for. The problem is just getting started. What's that first step towards setting up a new Vue project? Or we've talked to people that do PHPs, like something as simple as WordPress. What's the first step with WordPress? And anyone who's worked with WordPress over the past 15 years knows that first step has evolved over time. It's not as difficult as it used to be years and years ago. They've changed their first step to make it more user friendly. But if you're pulling in Vue.js, what's that first step with Vue.js? If you're working with React, what's that first step with React? And those steps have actually become more complicated because we've introduced silly things like ES6 and modules and TypeScript and Webpack. And it's like, all right, I want to learn this one thing, but here's the 10 other things I need to know first in order to do this one thing. And so many people get caught up on those 10 other checkboxes they have to mark, and they might not need to check those boxes. There might be a simpler thing we can do in order to introduce a concept. And then,
I get that completely, because I know when I was the first time I taught a PHP class, I teach at the local college on the side, and one of the first time I actually taught a PHP class, I didn't really think through the fact that a lot of these students have been in a Windows environment. And this is back when you couldn't run PHP on an IIS server back in the day, so you had to have Apache installed. And it didn't occur to me that, I have to teach them how to install Apache. I have to go through that process first before we can get into the coding. And that was one of those things that just kind of like, there's a big learning curve into this that I didn't even realize, because I had been in the world of, I was a Linux administrator. It's one of my first, full-time gigs. So it was kind of like, I gotta get this ball rolling. And I'm starting to see that with some of the newer technologies that come out with JavaScript, especially. There's a lot of things you have to do, prerequisites, I guess you would say, to get to that point. Whereas, like you said, with WordPress, it's gotten significantly easier. So one-click install on most hosts.
We have some clients, they're product companies, and we develop their training curriculums for them. Well, these products they're server-based. So in order to start learning the product, you have to have the server set up and ready to go already. So a part of our process is to build sandboxes around these products. So we can just drop a student into an environment and they don't have to worry about the setup process for the server, because 9 times out of 10, that server is just going to be ready to go for them anyway. Someone else is going to take care of that initialization. But if you have to know how to set all that stuff up, it can waste an entire day almost of do this, now do that. Now, we forgot this part over here. And it can take a lot of mental energy to knock that stuff out.
Yeah, that was why I was so thankful when WAMP came out.
Yeah.
When I was teaching, I was like, oh, wow, now I can just install this one thing. And I've got, PHP, Apache, and MySQL all put together on a Windows machine. And that saved us, many days of configuration in the classroom. So what are some things that you think are kind of like that leaders need to be focused on when they're trying to get training for their team, or to make sure their team is, staying current? Because I know I've seen some people on my team will go out and just, they'll just Google training and come back with nothing, or come back with a bunch of things that they say, what about these? And I'm like, no, that's garbage. Don't waste your time.
Yeah.
And whereas other folks say, I have to go off to a classroom in order to train. Well, what are your thoughts on how a leader or manager should handle some of these situations?
It's there's a couple things you have to really consider. The big one is going to be it's not the time. It's not the cost of the training itself. Usually that's just a line item in a budget. But the big cost for most people is that's time away from other work. So if you send an entire team, we're going with one of our clients right now talking about this exact issue, where they want 5 days of training, but then they have a team of 15 that they want to train. So do you literally take a team of 15 off for 5 days in a row to knock out all this training? You lose an essential week of productivity. And
that's 75 days worth of
work. It's a lot of man hours.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yes.
So but a larger company would say it's not cost effective for us to provide a trainer for anything less than 3 days. So most larger training companies won't do that sort of work. Now, I run a much smaller business. I'm a little bit more agile. We worked out a deal where we weren't doing the 5 days of training back to back to back to back. We kind of split it up over a couple weeks, where their team isn't taking an entire week off. They're taking maybe a day a week off. So everything keeps moving forward, but they have very specific days out of a month that they're taking for training. And we've set up the schedule so everything kind of builds off of the previous training. And it's one of those things. It's good for them because they can do without the team for one day a week, but 5 days was not reasonable. It's also, we're going to do it all virtually. So we're going to set up a screen share. I'm going to do the entire training from the comfort of my home and from the comfort of their homes. So there's no travel expense on their part or on my part. And if something comes up, we're recording the entire thing as well. So if someone needs to go leave and deal with an emergency, they can watch the recap later and see where they left off and pick up after that fact. So that's kind of the big one for a lot of companies is, how do I deal with my team not working on my projects for an extended period of time? And there are solutions to that. You just have to work with a company willing to be agile about it. The other big question is, are you training on the right material? So there's what the company needs you to know, and then there's what the person wants to learn themselves, and those two might not intersect the way that we would want them to. What an employer needs to do, or a manager who's looking for training for their team, they need to look at the next year or two out. So what technologies are we going to pull into our infrastructure? What would be beneficial for my team to know more about, and then find training designed around that. If you look at something like a Pluralsight, Pluralsight's probably the big elephant in the room. There's just a lot of stuff on Pluralsight, and you could just direct your team to say, go learn WordPress on Pluralsight. There's a lot about a lot of topics on there, and
there's probably a dozen or more WordPress classes on there that are many hours long.
Yeah, and they're all niched in a very specific way. So use this stack, or use that stack, or this stack over there, and you leave a lot up to making sure that the instructor teaches exactly what you're needing your people to know. I spend at least an hour or two consulting with potential training clients on what their team's goals are and the type of training that they need, because many of our courses are pre-canned, but if someone comes and tells me we need to know this, and this, but we're not using any of these features of a technology, well, that might be able to save them a day of training, and a day of training is worth several $1,000s. So if I come in and go, look, I can teach you A, B, and C. The course that we teach is also teaching D and E, but I can cut those out, and we can do maybe a 1-day training or a 2-day training versus multiple day training. Well, that's just dollar signs in a manager's office, or that's just dollar signs in a manager's eyes that they're saving, because I'm being a little bit agile about the material that we're presenting. So it's a very long-winded way of answering the question, but that's how we approach it: is be flexible for the customers, teach them exactly what they need, and work with them if they're not quite sure what they need.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I know probably 4 or 5 years ago, I got my team at my last job. I was managing a web and mobile development team, mostly .NET developers on the on one side of it, and we decided to get Pluralsight for everybody on the team. And I wanted to make sure that we used it properly, and we actually got our money's worth out of it, and that people got value out of it. And it took me so long to go through and figure out, like, here are the classes that I want the team to take because it's necessary for us. And I think I ended up spending more money on my time than it cost for the subscription. And I was like, I don't know if I'm going to do this again, because it's just so much work to make sure that it's targeted. And yet I had some people that had no interest in it whatsoever and didn't find value in it. Or I had other people that took probably so many classes I had to say, hey, stop the Pluralsight and just start coding.
And also with Pluralsight, there's no good mechanism where if you're in the learning path of stopping and saying, hey, I have a question. I'm not sure how we got from A to B to X. Apparently, I lost something in translation. And an instructor can take 10 steps back and go, oh, here's what you missed. I see the same questions asked over and over and over again. And usually when I'm doing a training, if someone's asking a question at a very specific point in the training, I know what they're going to ask before they even ask it. It's just one of those things you get from experience. And in Pluralsight, you don't have that option. You can send a tweet to the author on Twitter, and you might get a response, but those folks are busy off doing other things. In a training, I'm there for a very specific reason. I'm there to help you. And again, it's like if I get a question I don't know the answer to, we go look up the answer and we figure it out. Because other than you could just leave the question dangling, but that doesn't help anyone. So we'll go figure out the answer, and the entire class benefits from it because if you've ever watched someone research how to solve a problem, that is almost more insightful than actually just knowing the answer to the problem to begin with. Because the process of troubleshooting and debugging is much more valuable than just knowing the answer.
Yeah, I agree 100%. That's one of the things that whenever I do have a support call, I want to be on the screen with them. I want to do a screen share. I want to see what they're doing. I don't want them just to jump in and fix it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about you have a show that you do, Swift Kick. Can you talk a little bit about that show and maybe introduce it to our audience?
Yeah, definitely. It's called the Swift Kick Show. It's a somewhat bi-weekly show that we do online, all virtual. And that came out of just my experiences in the software development community. I'm a huge advocate for user groups and small conferences, or small regional conferences. And the Swift Kick Show was an opportunity for me to bring extremely smart people who normally are going around the country, around the world, talking about things that they're passionate about. Bring them online and give them a medium that's virtual for them to talk about the things that they're passionate about. And it's very, very low effort for all of us involved because you were on the show a couple of months ago, and you just sat in your office and did the talk from there. I sit in my home office and I do everything from here, but most of our folks that come on, they just get to relax at home, and it's not a ton of effort for them. But it goes back to my teach everything you know strategy. It's just, let's put the information out there. Let's get the personalities involved. Let's just teach everything that we know, and people will come and absorb that information. And I think people really appreciate it. We have some very loyal viewers that watch religiously every other week. And we have some really exciting guests coming up over the next several months.
Yeah, I think it's great. It's almost like going to a conference without having to leave. And instead of I know whenever I go to a conference, I get overwhelmed with the sessions. And I feel like I get, more value in between the sessions because I'm so overwhelmed with all the different sessions. This kind of breaks it apart and it spreads out a conference over, a couple of months, so you don't get overwhelmed and you get keyed in, and you can chat back directly to the person if you're tuned in live as well, which is I think another big benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like you said, the conference experience without having to pay or travel or actually show up to a conference, and everything's recorded. We have a YouTube channel that we put everything on. And that's how I get more guests to come on later. I point them to the YouTube page and say, here's all the good things that we've been trying to do. I would love for you to be a part of it.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of conferences, you also put together a conference recently in Virginia Beach. You want to talk a little bit about that?
I run a couple different events, but our big one is called Revolution Conf. And this next year, it's going to be on June 6th and 7th, 2019 in beautiful Virginia Beach, Virginia. We have a venue that's right off the beach. It's not in touristy Virginia Beach, but it's a couple blocks north of that. So you have a private beach almost that you can enjoy in the middle of the summer. It's it's a fantastic place to be. But we call ourselves technology agnostic. So whether you're a .NET person or a Java person, or you're doing something awesome like Erlang or Elixir, and just name anything on your stack, we want you to be able to come to RevolutionConf and get some value out of it. So we designed the conference, and we designed the talks and the speakers that we select around supporting that idea that if anyone comes into your talk, they should be able to leave with something actionable or something valuable from it. And we've had really good luck with that. One talk that is on the top of my head is we had a gentleman come in and did a talk on writing conversational bots, but his talk was focused around writing them in Ruby, which a small percentage of our audience would have any Ruby experience at all. So we talked to him about how to position that talk, not focused in Ruby, but to talk more about the conversational bot aspects of what he was building. And Ruby is just the mechanism that it accomplishes it. So folks were coming in that had Java backgrounds and .NET backgrounds and so on and so on. They all got something out of that talk because we took the focus off of Ruby and we put the focus on the main topic itself. And it wasn't any effort for him to change his talk. I think all we did was change the title. And that just naturally led into the talk being more valuable for everyone coming in. So that's been our secret sauce, is we try to make it all acceptable to everyone. And we're going into our 4th year of RevolutionConf.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to that. I just put down the notes in my calendar for June 6th and 7th. My wife's family's from that area, so that would be a great opportunity to go back and visit and maybe take a couple of days with them and then a couple of days at the conference.
Awesome, yeah.
So that's awesome. And you also I know you've been a kind of proponent of side hustles and entrepreneurship in general. How do you think that benefits? Like, let's say I'm a developer or a team lead. What kind of value can I get if I wanted to start a side hustle or a side business or start my own business? What kind of value would that have for me?
One thing I've learned just from doing this sort of work for such a long time is that my value as a professional, or if I were ever to go back to a full-time job, my value as an employee is much greater than that of a person who works a traditional 9 to 5 for 10, 20 years. And I don't, when I say that, it sounds really demeaning, and it's not meant to be demeaning. What it's meant to be is, if you look at a person who goes and works for a large company and they're there for an extended period of time, they're really only probably working on 1, maybe 2 projects. They're supporting a system, or just keeping that system going. So all of their experience is focused around this one core project, or maybe 2 core projects. If I go back over my consulting career over the past 7 years, it would take me about half an hour to count the number of projects I've had my hands in, the number of experiences I've had, the number of clients I've worked with. All that kind of builds my professional resume, and it helps me walk into any situation, no matter how bad it might be. And I have this resume of experience I'm able to pull from. So if I walk in, I have maybe a dozen solutions to a problem, and I know how to evaluate all those solutions. Whereas someone who's really only had 1 project under their umbrella, they might have had a problem there, but they only had 1 way to fix it. They don't have a breadth of experience to pull from. So I tell people all the time, if you can start a side hustle or doing any consulting on the side, it just helps you build that resume of experience, because if you're not getting that multiple project, multiple environments experience where you're working, go get it elsewhere. We use the phrase sometimes, there's a difference between a professional who has 10 years experience or a professional who has 1 year experience 10 times. And it's I see so many people who fall into that category of, oh, I've been doing this professionally for 30 years. It's like, awesome. Here, I'm going to give you something simple to do. Oh, I have no idea how to do that. Well, you said you've been doing this for 30 years, so this should be easy. Yeah, but I don't know what I'm doing here. It would take me a while to figure that out. So it's one of those little things. Just a side hustle helps you build some of that experience that you would not normally get in a 9 to 5.
Yeah, I encourage all my employees to do side hustles or side gigs, and try to do something that's not specifically related to the kind of stuff you're doing at work. So I had one example at my last job. One of my front end developers decided to learn SEO and digital marketing, and not really related at all. But what he was able to bring so he started learning it. He started going to meetups, and he eventually started doing SEO work on the side and getting monthly contract, like people paying him monthly fees to do SEO for their small businesses. But then he brought that in when he would design something, he would make sure all the SEO was there. So when it turned over to our marketing group, they're like, wow, this is already, this is easy. He had kind of built in a lot of that stuff already there. Which helped our business out. Not only, helped him out personally because he was making, several $100s on the side every month, but also it helped our company
Absolutely.
out.
And the best thing you can do as a manager or a business owner is to encourage that sort of thing. And I've seen a lot of companies that prohibit freelancing or moonlighting on the side.
Yeah.
And
yeah, me too. And I think that's a big mistake.
It is. They're not going to take your bread and butter away. It helps them put a little something extra in their pocket, and they get some experience that's not necessarily on your dime. So why would you not take advantage of that as a manager?
Exactly. I think you're absolutely right. And the way I always frame it to my employees is, I think it's a good idea to do this stuff on the side, but understand that I'm your biggest client.
Yeah.
And if you lose this big client, you lose a big lose a big deal. So I'm your biggest client. I always come first, and take it that route. I think this has been really good. Do you have any last pieces of advice for young leaders or small business owners or anybody out there that is in technology that you would want to give before we talk about how to connect with you?
I think the biggest piece of advice is what I said before: teach everything you know, and no matter how big or how small. Having a personal site that I don't like the term blog, but write articles and tell people about things you run into. We've all had that really weird issue that we've taken hours and hours to debug, and we put that mentally away. That's something that we should remember, but we always forget. So it's better to write that down and maybe make that public to everyone. So you teach something that you took hours and hours to figure out. It might help someone in the future, but more likely, the number of times I have Googled a problem and found my own blog post on it, I've lost count, and it helps me out tremendously because I'll say, I know I have solved this problem before. Let me go read my article where I solved this problem, and it saves me another several hours worth of work trying to figure it all out again.
Yeah, and I want to add on that. It's really good for, when you're applying for different jobs or going out there. I know whenever I get a resume and I Google the person, I'm going to look them up. And if they've written articles about things that we're experiencing or that shows that they have an understanding and a passion for the things that we do, man, I'm so much more interested in talking to that person than someone that I can't find online or I only see a very weak LinkedIn page and a couple of Twitter posts. All right. So how can people get in touch with you and learn more about the things that you're doing over at SwiftKick and Revolution Conf and everywhere else?
Well, I'm most active on Twitter. I'm at 1KevGriff. That's the number 1 KevGriff. SwiftKick is at swiftkick.in, like swift kick in the pants, which some of us we need every now and then. And that's about it. I also have my personal page, kevgriffin.com, that you can come read anything that I've written. It's one of those things that I have just not putting any effort into within the past year or so. I keep telling myself I need to go back, and I have all this stuff I want to write about, but it's just too much other stuff comes up first.
Yeah, I'm the same way. My personal website, johnrado.com, has not been updated in probably 18 months, if not more. I've been putting everything into a Geek Leader. So, all right. Well, this has been fun. I really enjoyed it.
Me too. I appreciate being invited on.